Hello and welcome to experiment 5. We're going to do a simple distillation. We're going to take two liquid compounds and we're going to separate them based on their boiling point. We'll set the apparatus up first, then we'll put the two compounds, the ethanol and cyclohexanol, into a 50 milliliter round bottom flask, and we'll distill over the ethanol first, and then we'll distill over the cyclohexanol. And then we'll weigh the two and get the mole fractions of each of the compounds. So, I got my goggles on, the gloves are on, coat's on, buttoned up, ready to go. Let's get started. So, the first thing I want to do is to show you how to set up the apparatus. First thing you want to do is get a transformer out, heating mantle, plug the heating mantle into the transformer, turn it on, and make sure it warms up. If it warms up, you know it's working properly and it's okay. Then you can turn it off. Okay, we're going to start up by putting 3 ring stands together, nice and tight. Make sure they don't wobble. I'm going to get a clamp here. I'll take the 50 milliliter round bottom flask, clamp it, and put it about 10 centimeters or so onto the first ring stand. Then I'm going to take the distillation head and I'm going to grease the top part of the male end. This is the female end, male end. What I like to do is get some weighing paper, just put a little grease on it, and that'll be the grease that I use for the whole procedure. So I just grease the top part lightly, and I put it in there, swirl it around, make sure it's a good seal. Next I'm going to take a thermometer adapter, and I'll do the same process. A little grease on the top here, put it in, swirl it around. For this particular distillation, we're going to use a 240 thermometer because the boiling point of the second compound is in the 140 or so. So what we want to do is we want to push this into the thermometer adapter, and we want to make sure that the top of the pool here is across the armpit. It's very important where the thermometer goes. So I take out the thermometer adapter, push this in, and I want to make sure that the top of the pool of the thermometer is across the armpit of the distillation head. Now, this should be perpendicular this way, and it should be perpendicular this way. And when it's perpendicular both ways, we're ready to go to the next step. Next step is, once again, I'll grease the top part of the male part of the thermometer adapter here. And I'm going to slide in the condensing tube. But before I do that, I want to get out the 2 hoses that I'm going to use for the experiment. One of them will be longer, one of them will be shorter. I want to put the short one on the male end of the condenser, and I want to put the long one on the female end of the condenser. And I just kind of want to lay the hoses in back like this. Okay. Now I will take the condenser, put it up to the distillation head here, and take a kelp clamp, clamp the big end around the big end, the small end around the small end, and we'll clamp it like that. Okay. Now we still want to make sure that this is perpendicular. If it isn't, you can always loosen this clamp, tighten it up to make it perpendicular. This is on. It's a good seal. Now we're going to brace this with a 3-finger clamp. And how we do that is we will push back the middle ring stand, put a clamp on it, then we'll take a 3-finger prong, a 3-finger clamp I mean, and we'll place it on the ring stand, and we're going to try to line it up so it matches with the condenser. Okay? So when we push in the condenser, all we have to do is angle it right and then just clamp down on it. So if we angle it right and we turn both clamps down, we're going to hold on to the condenser without moving it. So our goal here was to put the condenser here without moving it, so we still have a perpendicular apparatus. Okay? We want this to be perpendicular this way, and this way. Now I'm going to move to the other side. I will once again grease the top of the male part. Put a vacuum adapter on it, clamp it again, and then this will be used to collect in a 50 milliliter round bottom flask. Okay? Problem I did here, I didn't plan ahead enough. This isn't high enough. It's no big deal. All I'm going to have to do is loosen this up, raise it a little, loosen this up, raise it a little. Okay, make sure it's still tight. And so you'll be collecting the distillate in this 50 milliliter round bottom flask like this. So we have the flask where the initial compounds will go into. They'll heat up, come over based on their boiling point, come over here. When they come over here, they're going to touch the condensing tube that is cooled. They're going to come down, drop down, and they're going to collect into the collecting flask here. Now, the last thing we have to do here is hook up the water. This is very, very important. So you want to hook up the water to the water spout here. Remember that the cold water goes in the bottom here, comes all the way up, comes out the top here, and then this goes into the trough. The important thing to remember here is turn on the water slow. Turn it 1/8 of a turn, count to 5. Turn it another 1/8 of a turn, count to 5. Okay? You want to turn that on very, very slow. And you notice you're going to get a little bit of an air bubble here. That's easy to get rid of. All you have to do is turn this a little till the bubble goes away and turn it back down. Alright, when we do the distillation now, we'll hook up the heating mantle under here. Okay? And we'll put some ice in the collecting flask. So what you want to do now is Let me move to the other side. What we want to do now is just simply loosen up the 50 milliliter round bottom flask here. Okay. I'm going to go over to the hood. I'm going to pump 25 milliliters of the solution of the cyclohexanol and ethanol. Okay. I'm going to rehook up the flask now, round bottom flask. When I do that, I want to make sure that it's still perpendicular this way, perpendicular this way. The thermometer's in the correct spot. Everything is sealed good. Okay. And the last clamp that we put on, since the plastic clamp can't fit over this, we're going to put this metal clamp on like this. And now we're good to do the distillation. So I got a bowling stone. You only need one. I'll get one bowling stone out. I'll lift up the thermometer adapter. Just drop it in. I dropped 2 bowling stones in. That's okay. Now I'm ready to go. So what I want to do, I want to hook up the heating mantle. First you have the ring stand. Then we'll place in the heating mantle. And then you want to move it up so it's snug. Turn on the heating mantle. And you want to turn it all the way up. You want to get this going. Now, when you run the distillation, the rule of thumb is this area on the condensing tube is always comfortable to touch. If it's not comfortable to touch, then, and if it's too warm, then you got to turn the water up a little. When you turn the water up a little, it will become comfortable to touch. So, turn it on 100. Let it start to boil. When it starts to boil, we're probably going to turn it down to 70 or 60. We want to get a collection rate of about 1 drop per second. We're going to continue to do this, and then you're going to notice that the temperature is going to jump up. It's going to be around 80 or so, and it's going to jump up to about 140. In the middle of the jump is when we change the flask, the round bottom collecting flask. Okay? For right now, I'm just heating it up, starting to get warmed up a little. And then I'm going to wait until I start to get some bubbles, turn it down to 70. Make sure this is comfortable to touch. Adjust the rate so it's 1 drop per second. Make sure there's ice in this little flask here. So it's starting to boil now, so I'm going to turn it down to about 70. The temperature is around 60. It's moving up. You can see the vapors climbing on the walls. Touch this. It's comfortable to touch. Everything's going well. I just want to keep the adjustment of the heat so I get about 1 drop a second. If it goes too fast, I can lower the heat a little bit, turn it down more. If it's not fast enough, I can turn up the heat or maybe tighten up the connection here. So it's starting to come over now. Cool to touch. Everything looks good. We're writing down the temperature, the setting, and how many drops. And this is the actual procedure. Okay? And it's gotten up to about 80. And you can see that the ethanol is starting to come over. And it's about 1 drop a second. It's a little bit fast, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Try to get that rate to about 1 drop a second. And then when this shoots up again, I will switch flask, collect the rest, but I will never let it boil dry. I'll collect it until there's a few drops left in here. So you can see it's just above 90, the temperature. The drops have slowed down quite a bit. I'm just waiting till when it starts to shoot up towards about 105, 110, and then I'll switch the flask over. I'll switch to collecting. The drops really get slow. The drops have almost stopped, actually. And this is how I know this is going to be the point where it's going to be the switch from the ethanol to cyclohexanol. Keep an eye on the temperature. And the temperature shot up to about 103. It's starting to shoot up now. Now this is the point I know I have to switch. The drops have almost stopped. The temperature starts to shoot up. This is the point I'm going to switch. Okay? So, I take out the old flask and I just give it a little turn here. Put in the new flask. I'll weigh the flask before. I'll weigh the flask after. The difference will give me the amount of ethanol. From the amount of ethanol and weight, I can get to the moles of ethanol and weight. And how you weigh this is very simple. You just take the quart, put it on the scale, you tar it, then you put this on that, and that gives you the weight. Now we're going to collect the rest of the cyclohexanol, but you don't want to let it boil dry. There'll be always a few little drops left over. Temperature is shot way up now. Now it's into 130, 140. So, to go over when you should switch, it's going to get into the 90s or so, and then the drops are going to slow down a lot. When the drops almost stop, you're going to see what starts to shoot up kind of rapidly. That's the point that you switch to flask at. Now I'm going to do the distillation until there's just a few drops left, making sure this is always cool to the touch. And then I'll weigh it, find out the grams, find out the moles. To get the mold fractions, you add up both the moles, divide that into each individual moles times 100. And the last step of this experiment will be something with the refractory index machine, which is a very simple tool to use. First thing you want to know about the refractory index is this is a crystal chem wipes. That's all you use to clean it with. All you do after you weighed it is pour a little bit just to cover the surface of the crystal. Doesn't have to be a lot. Push read. It gives you a number. You write that down. That's the refractory index number. This particular case is 1.3677. Don't worry about the temperature and other stuff. That's just an adjustment.